and I mean, Obama thought in his own way that it was in crisis when he ran in 2008. He thought that liberalism was a dying faith, and that Bill Clinton had fallen far short of what he could have done or should have done under the circumstances. When he did, I mean, if you think back to the 1990s, Clinton had a booming economy for most of his 2 terms. No foreign wars to speak of, except the adventure in the Balkans that we got into, and yet he was not able to use all of those propitious circumstances to enact national health care. His version, Hillary Care, failed with the Democratic Congress. I mean, he was not defeated by Republicans. He was in effect defeated by his own party in the first 2 years of his first term. But anyway, Obama really thought that progressives' faith in progress and liberals' faith in liberalism was crumbling, and that they had accommodated themselves to a more conservative world, a post-Reagan world, and that there was no getting out, and that he thought that the lesson the Democrats learned from Clinton 1 and 2, I mean the first and second term, not Mr. and Mrs., was that there was no going back to the Great Society or to the New Deal. That kind of aggressive, across-the-board, rapid liberal activism and political breakthrough was a thing of the past. It was all going to be small ball and school uniforms and midnight basketball and all of the little policies that Clinton managed to squeak out in his second term. But Obama thought that Clinton was wrong about that. He thought that he could revive liberalism, that it could return to the aggressive policy, the aggressive pusher of policies, and really the center of American political life that it had been in the 1960s and in the 1930s. And he took fantastic risks in his first term. I don't want to say ignoring, and he wouldn't agree to that, but putting the issues of the economy and jobs on the back burner so that he could enact Obamacare and Dodd-Frank and the stimulus, which, although it was supposed to affect the economy, really was designed to bail out public employee unions. I mean, that's the biggest chunk of it. But it was a long game, and he took the risk that he could do something which he thought would be great, and which no one in 100 years had been able to do, namely bring nationalized health care to the United States, finally. This was the Holy Grail that FDR was not able to do, Truman was not able to do, Kennedy, even Johnson was not able to do it. I mean, Johnson was able to provide national health care for old people and poor people, Medicare and Medicaid, but not for everyone. Obamacare does everyone. It's a 100% solution for a problem that is 8% maybe of the economy, or of the people, I mean. So anyway, he took a huge risk, but he succeeded, and he thinks, I can almost guarantee you that to this very day, if you ask him, he thinks he has saved liberalism and revived it again, and now that it's in the driver's seat once more.
And he got reelected.
And he got reelected, which was a close call. I mean, it was actually a pretty close call. But I think what he doesn't quite understand, or at least he has not acknowledged, is that the real crisis of liberalism is just beginning. I mean, he thinks he's solved that crisis, but I think he's really only at the edge of it. And that crisis is partly fiscal. Like Mrs. Thatcher once famously said, the problem with socialism is you run out of other people's money. We've run out of other people's money. And the government is broke. And our healthcare programs especially are broke. And his solution to 2 healthcare programs that are going broke, Medicare and Medicaid, is to add a third. It's a little counterintuitive, you say at least. But anyway, and the other reason for the crisis of liberalism is really philosophical, I think. It's less obvious but more deadly. And increasingly liberals, especially in the academy, who are an early indicator of where liberalism is going in many cases, don't believe in liberalism anymore. I mean, they don't believe that it's true, or that it's right, or that it's just. And why not? Because they don't believe there's such a thing as truth, or justice, or righteousness. Those are value judgments.
There you go.
They're part of cultures, they're part of history, but they can't be true. And therefore, you know, liberalism, and mostly this is still avant-garde liberalism, but look, it affects Obama. The rug is being pulled out from under their own arguments because they don't increasingly really think it's true. They just think it's their preference. And so they have to impose it because they can't really persuade people to something they don't believe themselves. And so, you know, you may have noticed that liberalism seems more and more authoritarian, whether it's sodas in New York or contraceptives for Catholic institutions of various kinds. I mean, liberalism used to talk about, you know, freedom. Now it talks about, now it insists on conformity and on, you know, with a heavy hand in forcing people to live the way it thinks you ought to live. And I think that contradiction is going to be very difficult for liberalism, and it'll be good for conservatives, their problems. But the fact that they have problems doesn't mean that we will win. Our politicians, I think I said this, are almost as remiss as liberals in not regarding the Constitution as their business. And they, like, we've been taught this by the Supreme Court, that the final decision on all issues of constitutionality rests with the court. It does in the case in front of them. But there's nothing in the nature of the American system that says, and there are many examples quite to the contrary, that the people at large, that their president, that their elected officials have to regard every Supreme Court decision as instantly settling every issue. Because if they did, Dred Scott would still be the law of the land. Lincoln and the Republicans refused to accept Dred Scott as the political rule going forward. And so they maintained that slavery should be contained, even though the Supreme Court had just said you can't contain it constitutionally, because they said the court was wrong in its interpretation of the Constitution. And look, it's almost purely a matter of intellectual illumination. I mean, our politicians have to study these issues, as we do, as citizens, and get the courage as well as the wisdom to make these kinds of arguments, and not to accept it when Nancy Pelosi, in her other, or at least one other of her infamous statements, when asked, you know, where's the authority in the Constitution for Obamacare? You know, she famously responded, "Are you kidding? Are you kidding?" I mean, as though she had never been asked that question, never thought about that question, and that anyone who would raise it was such an obvious ignoramus that they, you know, had no business being in American politics. Well, we've got to answer her, and we've got to insist that our guys and gals take it to them on those questions. And it's not that difficult, really. And I think I'm very confident, actually, that our next generation of political leaders is much better than the current one. This was my impression, at least, of the two national conventions, if you watched them last year. I thought the young people on speaking for the Dems were ordinary, dull, uninspiring, and that our younger ones, from Marco Rubio to Martina, what's her name in New Mexico, Suzanne Martinez, and Ted Cruz and others, very smart, very capable, and I'm optimistic. We've got some very good young conservatives coming up now.